it's morning, right? Good morning. So really quick before I forget, early detection saves lives, first stage breast cancer survivor. So I wanted to mention that because it's October. All right, so let's get started. Thank you. So surviving migration madness. Yeah, Humana did move from Terraform Enterprise to HCP Terraform, and it was a lot of fun. So hi, my name is Yvette Villanueva, and I am Associate Director of Automation Engineering and Advancement for Humana. Down here, I have Jamin Joshi, and he is one of my senior engineers, and he played a key role in our migration success. So corner him later with all your questions, because the wonderful product that Armand talked about yesterday, Terraform Migrate, did not exist when we started our venture. So thanks to Thomas, which is back home, and Jamin, we were successful with our own automation. So a little bit about myself, my background. So I have been with Humana for a little over 2.5 years. Prior to coming to Humana, I was at American Express Global Business Travel. There, my then boss, which happens to be my current director, he and I stood up the Site Reliability Engineering Organization, so SRE, for those of you familiar. And as my friend Shashi says, one of my SRE engineers, that's where I got all these grays as well, so yay. So after about a year of running the SRE org, and our phones were ringing at all hours of the night, and we were best friends with the major incident management team, we decided we needed an observability and automation team. So we needed some monitoring, some alerting, and hopefully some self-healing, right? And that was the evolution. So for those of you who are not familiar with Humana, so we are a healthcare organization. We're currently servicing over 16 million members across US, Washington, DC, and Puerto Rico. We've been around for over 30 years, and we have over, I'm gonna stop doing that, I swear. We have over 67,000 employees. My team sits in a part of the organization that's responsible for core enterprise engineering services. And more specifically, my team is automation platforms, and we are responsible for things like Terraform and Ansible and a few others. So 2,695 is the number of workspaces, and 5 was the number of environments, right? So this basically sums up the data that was available to me the day that we decided to move from Terraform Enterprise to HCP Terraform. And so for those of you that are familiar with Enterprise, it's your infrastructure, it's your database, it's your data to retrieve. So first things first, we needed some data. We needed a lay of the land. And fortunately, due to the nature of what my team is responsible for, I have a PowerShell master on the team, so within no time, we had some data. So what did the data show us? First, it showed us a breakdown of the 2,695 workspaces by environment. As you can see, we name our environments very fancy, metadata there, A through E. And so the other thing that it showed us was, and this graph, if you're looking for it, it's not on there. It also showed us that we had almost 300 approved modules available for users. We didn't have visibility to the utilization of the modules, so I knew I had 300 modules that could potentially be utilized at any time. What else did the data tell us? This one was scary when I put this pivot together. The 2,695 workspaces were spread across 132 organizations within Humana. The data also showed us some good stuff, though. It showed us that there were some optimization opportunities that existed for over 500 workspaces. And what I mean by that was the footprint of component to workspace utilization could be simplified. And we could then have a smaller footprint in workspaces for particular teams and particular organizations. So what we knew is we could reduce our workspace footprint prior to moving. All right. So what did we do next? Well, it was time to plan the work, right? We started by building the runway. So a big thing for me was simplifying the migration and requiring a minimal level of effort from our tenants and from all of our dependencies, so networking and everything else. So when we talked about standing up our HCP Terraform agents, we decided that we would use the same namespace as our existing Terraform Enterprise agents. Next, we needed to build automation. So we needed to create automation because the automation available from Hashi at the time, so Terraform Migrate wasn't available, and the automation that was available would require us to move all of our workspaces at once. And as you guys can see from the complexity, 132 organizations, 5 environments, and 2,600 workspaces, that wasn't really going to happen. So we needed to find a way to do that on our own. So we built automation to create the new workspaces, to copy the variables over, build the team relationships, ownerships, and move state files. Then we also had 2 automation workflows that were used to build new workspaces. So we needed to pivot those workflows to start building HCP Terraform workspaces instead. Now, one of those workflows we owned and we managed. It was ours, we could do as we wanted, and so that was gonna be easier than our second. Our second workflow was tightly coupled with another platform/environment owner, and we were gonna need to work with them to build that automation and make that pivot happen. And then the third piece was the Terraform modules. So as I had mentioned, we had over 300 or approximately 300 Terraform modules that needed to be refactored for HCP Terraform. My automation platform team sits under automation engineering, and my brother team, which is service enablement, was responsible for that. So we partnered with them and obviously ensured that they were working within our timelines and really supporting that effort. So next, we worked on simplifying the journey. This is actually one of my favorite ones because, so I mentioned that I've been with Humana for 2.5 years. What I didn't mention is I had been with Humana about a month when my boss said, hey, I really want to move to Terraform Cloud. How do we make that happen? So my tenants didn't even know who I was yet, right? And here I am planning this huge migration. And so I thought, well, do an introduction. Hi, my name's Yvette. I'm new here. By the way, making plans. Don't have any dates yet and don't know what it's going to take. But at some stage in the near future, we will be migrating to, I swear I feel like I'm doing the Twitter and X thing, but then it was Terraform Cloud, but HCP Terraform, right? So the communication went out. And then in the communication, I took the opportunity to highlight the fact that there were some optimization opportunities coming. So, hey, maybe a potential reach out on our end to work with you. And then I called out one of my favorite things that the data told us. And that was that we had teams that didn't always remember to delete their workspaces when they were done with them. And so we might have had a few of those lying around. And so there was a great opportunity and optimization there because I knew we were moving and I was willing to have yard sales for sure, anything else to get rid of the things that we didn't want to take with us, right? And so I wasn't going to take workspaces that didn't need to be utilized or were no longer utilized, right? And I didn't need to take over very complex mappings of workspace to components, so we worked on those, and this was my opportunity. It's huge because we kind of hit them with a lot of information. So now I've told all these people we're doing these things, and we don't know how we're going to do them, so now we started to work to minimize that impact, right? To simplify the steps. That meant getting together to understand what it was going to take for each tenant in their individual, I'm sitting in front of my keyboard, what is it going to take? and then figure out what can we do for them, which ones of those steps are things that we can do, and which ones of those steps are things that we need them to do. So obviously there were things that were variables and things that are related to security that we would not be able to move for them. And we had different iterations also of maturity, right, in terms of our deployments and pieces like that. So we definitely needed to identify what we could do for them. And then what we did is we began working with the teams to simplify their workspace footprint. So there were really only a handful of teams. This was not all 132 organizations, or that I don't know that I'd be done yet. But we had a handful of teams that had a huge footprint and a great opportunity. And so it really was a win-win. I didn't have to do a lot of convincing, even though there was a level of effort on their part. What I did need to do is provide an engineer that had the vision and could guide them to what we were recommending so they could make that happen. And of course, we also built some automation so that we could go in and clean out unused workspaces based off of some criteria that we had determined, right? Created a policy, communicated to teams, and so we built that automation to start doing cleanup as well. So these are artifacts of our simplified migration path. So at Humana, we have some internal governance processes that I won't tremendously bore you with. But these graphics at the top are actually artifacts from our governance process and the documentation that we submitted. The intent here was really to highlight that it will be simple. It's a big ask in terms of number of workspaces, but in terms of level of effort to our tenants, it can be mitigated and controlled. So what we show on the left is environments A through E. Those tenants could move interdependent of one another. So at any point, whenever they were ready, they could move. We obviously start by, again, oversimplified, standing up Terraform, right? We're copying over their workspace, and then they would be moving their variables, and they would be doing their validation, and then once everybody did that, I could sunset Terraform Enterprise. Woo! And then on the right, what you see is we have one environment, E, that required all of the workspaces to move at the same time. And that would be controlled by the platform team that owned that environment. This is also the environment that had the workflow that was creating their own enterprise workspaces, and they would have to build automation to adjust that. So, after months of working, our simplification and optimization, getting our runway built, so infrastructure, all those good pieces, some of our governance processes, we were ready to actually welcome people into HCP Terraform. At that point, we had 1,941 number of workspaces and 2 migration paths. So I would be lying if I didn't say I was very excited by this point. So ready, set, go. Yes. Environments A through D. So HCP Terraform is open for business. We're excited. A communication goes out to all the teams notifying them. You can request at any time now to be migrated over, right? We execute the automation to actually create the workspaces and move their variables and all that, and we're waiting for them to come tell us, just move my state file, I'm ready. Also, to support, we created rapid migration sessions. So rapid migration sessions was something really successful in my previous life, and we'll get into that in the lessons learned. And I thought it would be amazing to create sessions Wednesdays and Fridays where teams could come and migrate with engineers that would be there to answer questions and help them out, right? So teams were invited, everybody that they needed was there and available. And we did have some teams show up, and we did complete some migrations. So 1%. That's the percentage of workspaces that moved after my announcement. So I like to call this the truth hurts, because it does. We were excited, right? It was disheartening, but from the conversations that I was having with teams, either the ones we were working to optimize with, or just teams within my, my blast radius, as I like to say, one thing that was the common denominator is that they had competing priorities, and I really was offering them, the door was open, but I wasn't telling them when I was closing the other door, and so it was time to pivot. So in thinking about those conversations and thinking about where we were, we needed to come up with a different way. So we decided we'd move them, we basically migrate for them. And the one thing that we would need them to do is bring in their sensitive variables and the things that we did not have access to. So we also knew we needed to build automation to lock their TFE workspaces, right? So we scheduled a migration for them. We built the automation to lock those Terraform workspaces for environments A through D. We communicated to the teams that their TFE workspaces were not going to be available after that specified date. And we gave them time. I won't talk about how much time, but we gave them time. And then we executed the migration on the specified date, right? So the automation scripts ran, we created the new workspaces, variables, all the relationships, and we moved their state file, and we locked their enterprise workspaces. Yay, 4 down, 1 to go. All right, so it was, all along we were working with the team that owned Environment E, but just like all other teams, they had competing priorities. And their environment is a significant environment in our roadmap at Humana. And so there was a lot of bartering, negotiating. No, I'm just kidding. There was a lot of working to ensure that we were going to get the cycles that we needed from the team members and at what point, right? So we worked with them. We aligned on when they would be able to move. And we sent out the communication very similar to A through D, let them know what their migration date would be, and then we executed the migration on that date. So this is what I wished for when I was planning my migration journey, right? I'd be like, yay, we start here and we trickle down. At the end, I clean up and I'm good to go. This is actually what I got. So the red line depicts the number of licenses, because I like to really live on the edge. And I told my rep, which wasn't Sue at the time, I told my rep, yeah, we're not going to need more licenses. We're going to be just fine. You know, I'm super excited. Everybody's excited. They're going to move. We're good. So anyway, so as you guys can see, here, this little green star represents the time when Environment E platform owners told us that they actually weren't going to be able to migrate and do everything that we were asking of them until April of 2024. So 12 months is what they were asking for. About here, this is when I started stressing a little bit about the license count, maybe just a little bit. I might have had nights that looked like this, I don't know. I don't know, this is what happens when you tell AI to give you, I think the prompt was, woman counting workspaces as she sleeps. So for those of you that were interested in the prompt, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So anyway, so green star shows when they actually moved, when we were ready to start migrating, or I should say, getting rid of the workspaces we were using to manage the platform, the workspaces they were using, and all that good stuff, right? So if we look back, I think this is something I would have wanted to know right off the bat in my migration, is kind of how am I going to spend my time? Do I have the right, oh, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Do I have the right people on the bus? Do I have the right people on the team? Do I have the right resources and skill sets? So the majority of our time, I would say, was split between communication and collaboration, maintenance and optimization, and planning, right? in planning would go contract negotiations, the strategy, the data extraction, visualizations, analysis, and it really was plan, do, check, right, coming back. Communication and collaboration was huge. So I purposely started each one of the slides on communication simply because I did have a few people that said, I didn't know this was happening, but for the most part, that did not happen. And we're talking about a lot of users, right? I communicated what was coming and what I did know. And that's always challenging, and most people are hesitant to communicate, and I've been one of those. When you don't know all the answers, right? You don't know everything, but I think we have learned that it's nice to know what to anticipate. And so communication was huge, collaborating with teams, and the teams that were able to optimize their workspace consumption was significant, right? As you can see, we spent a little sliver of time in our internal governance board, right? So that would be, for example, the simplified migration paths, artifacts, and those came from that process. And I think most companies will have something similar through their enterprise architecture department. Terraform modules, right? Refactoring. So that definitely happened in partnership with our brother team. And, but that was one of the prerequisites to moving, right? I needed runway, I needed infrastructure there, so I needed them to be able to access HCP Terraform. But they were used to their modules ready to go, fully baked with the blueprints from our security department, right? They don't have to think about those things. So that was a big piece of it. The maintenance and optimization helped us to recoup workspaces. I call that the yard sale and going to the thrift store, making donations before you leave. Everything that is removing clutter, right? I looked for those opportunities, and since we were building runway, there was time to do that. And then, as you guys can see, the moving of the workspaces was a much smaller piece, especially when you move them for them. My roller coaster ride. So let's talk a little bit about the lessons learned. The 1%. These are not the people, making 99% of the money. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the 1% of the people that moved, right? So what this taught me was that my excitement doesn't translate to everybody else because they're busy, right? And some people were excited, and they were the first ones who came knocking on the door. They were waiting for us to be able to give them those workspaces. But then everybody else, they were busy, right? So dates help with competing priorities. That's huge. I feel cheesy using this one, but it's so true. So plan, do, check, act, and be ready to adjust your plans. A few times in this migration, as we were looking at some of the reporting that we built to track state files and update dates and who's using what and where, we just realized that the migration wasn't moving the way that we wanted to, and it gave us an opportunity to adjust our plans, right? So we never thought about admin users on Terraform Enterprise workspaces. And so as we were monitoring the progress of a migration, what we found was that a user had unlocked themselves in Terraform Enterprise and gone, made updates, done their releases, they were good to go. And so the state file that was sitting in HCP Terraform was out of sync. So we reached out to the user, made sure he understood what the issue was. We resynced the state file. And then we wrote a little bit of automation to strip all the admin rights out of all of the workspaces so that we wouldn't have this problem moving forward. The other thing is that I hadn't actually mentioned prior to, but this was important, was so users were worried. We were a little concerned. We had never done this. We're going to delete a bunch of, delete 2,000 workspaces. So what we had told users is, we'll hold on to them for 60 days, right? And that way you could feel warm and fuzzy that no matter what, it's sitting there. And so that was a big part of us having to strip out those permissions because those workspaces were going to exist for 60 days. Know your limits. You can think of this one however you want. But in my case, as I needed to pivot, I was coming up against a change freeze, right? So I don't know, depending on your industry, when I was in the travel industry in September, we'd do hard freezes, no changes, busy travel month. And so we were going to be coming up on a change freeze. So I needed to understand that and weave that into my plans, along with understanding my governance processes, so those artifacts and those pieces that came out of that. Because I weaved that into my planning, I was able to reuse artifacts. I was able to tell the same story across the board. It was always the same messaging. So understanding and knowing your limits and knowing how to weave that in was important. I love data. I'm a data nerd. And so data is everything, right? Extract good data and create dashboards to track progress, or lack thereof, like ours was. But the data really told us a lot, right? Admin user, somebody unlocked themselves, things like that. The data told me I had 132 organizations to work with at the beginning, and therefore I knew that communication and collaboration was going to be key to the effort. So I stole this from Steve Jobs. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. So the success of this migration was only possible through the collaborative efforts of many teams at Humana. I wrote that down because I wanted to say it right. But seriously, from the teams that worked with us to optimize their workspaces, that trusted us and said, oh yeah, we're really busy and we promised our leadership all these things, but sure, I'm gonna do your initiative. And from my team, so Thomas back home, Wes, even Doug, and the rest of the team, our platform teams that worked with us. It was an amazing journey, really sets us up to start utilizing HCP Terraform, the new capabilities and things that are coming. Now we've formed collaborative relationships with teams that we may be coming to later and saying, hey, new feature. Now I know which teams could use which features, right? So there were a lot of wins in the process in terms of collaboration and communication and working closely with those teams and respecting the fact that they have initiatives and their own deliverables. I think that really helped us be successful. So, thank you.